Back when I was in college, my best friend, I'll call him John, and I were basically inseparable. We hung out every single day, and since we were also roommates, we were constantly together. Now, to be clear, it wasn't that we were unintelligent. We were just really good at making dumb, impulsive decisions when we were together. We had a habit of getting ourselves into trouble doing reckless stuff, sneaking into abandoned houses, pulling dangerous stunts, and occasionally crossing into probably illegal territory. Climbing water towers was one of our brighter ideas, just pointless, risky nonsense like that. One night, though, we came up with something that felt tame compared to our usual stupidity. We decided it would be a good idea to explore the woods behind our town in the middle of the night. Nothing specific, we just wanted that adrenaline rush you get from doing something you probably shouldn't. For some context, forests surrounded our town on all sides, but the section behind the town was different. That was the area nobody went near, at least no normal person did. Even John and I, who were no strangers to bad ideas, had never been back there. Decades earlier, a massive fire had wiped out a large part of that side of town. Most of it was abandoned afterward, and since there was nothing left out there, the woods beyond it were basically forgotten too. No hiking trails, no footpaths, just untouched forest. We grabbed a couple of flashlights and headed out. It took about half an hour to walk from campus to the edge of town, then another 10 minutes weaving through the burnt-out remains to reach the tree line. Once we were sure no one was around, we switched on our flashlights and stepped into the woods. Within just a few minutes, the glow from the town disappeared completely, leaving us with only faint moonlight and our narrow beams of light cutting through the dark. At first, it honestly wasn't that exciting. After that initial creepy feeling of entering a forest at night faded, everything felt normal, quiet, just endless trees in every direction. No ruins, no strange markings, nothing unusual at all. Then, completely out of nowhere, John froze and pointed ahead. In the distance, weaving between the trees, was a light. It wasn't firelight. It wasn't natural. It was unmistakably a flashlight. And the weirdest part? It was low to the ground. I mean literally on the forest floor. As we moved closer, it became obvious. That's exactly what it was. A flashlight sitting there in the dirt, switched on, with no one anywhere around it. There was nothing else nearby either. No tent, no bags, no signs that someone had set up camp. And since it was a normal battery-powered flashlight, whoever owned it had to have been there recently, probably earlier that same night. Otherwise, the batteries would have died by now. Neither of us could wrap our heads around how someone could just lose a flashlight and not realize it. In a pitch-black forest, it would be impossible to miss. That's when the idea hit us at the same time. Whoever dropped it had likely been running. And if they were running and never came back for it, then they were probably running from something. That thought sent a shiver straight through me. Honestly, that should have been the moment we turned around and left. But instead, the rush of adrenaline we felt as we scanned the trees was exactly what we'd come out there for. We agreed to leave the flashlight where it was, just in case someone came back looking for it. Then I took the lead and kept moving deeper into the woods, with John close behind me. At that point, we were both curious, almost eager, to see what else we might find, hoping we could somehow piece together what had happened out there. Less than 2 minutes after leaving the area, a sharp cracking noise snapped behind us. Then another, and another. 3 or 4 sticks breaking in quick succession, no more than 20 or 30 feet behind John. We spun around instantly, shining our lights everywhere. But there was nothing. Still, it had us on edge. We kept going for another 5 minutes before we heard it again. The same sound, again, coming from just behind John. This time, I could have sworn it sounded like someone sprinting across the forest floor, but once again, there was nothing to see. After that second time, the mood completely shifted. This wasn't the fun, thrilling fear we were expecting. This was real fear, the kind that makes your stomach sink and tells you something isn't right. Which was crazy, because this was supposed to be tame compared to the dumb stuff we usually did. I mean, what were the odds of running into someone out here in the middle of the night? Especially in this part of the woods. We still couldn't say for sure that what we were hearing was a person, but it sure sounded like one. It happened again and again, 5 or 6 times total. Until finally, when we turned around one more time, we caught it, just barely. A shadow slipping out of our flashlight beam and disappearing behind a tree. John had clearly seen it too, because we both locked up at the exact same time. Instead of quickly turning around like before, we just stood there, staring into the darkness behind us. It felt longer than the other times, like our bodies knew something was wrong before our minds fully caught up. Then, about 10 seconds later, it happened. A figure shifted. A head slowly leaned out from behind the tree, just enough to look at us. That was it. We didn't think, we ran. We bolted sideways through the trees and then cut back, sprinting in the direction we'd come from. I'm pretty sure we ran full speed for a solid 5 minutes before finally slowing down, completely out of breath. After that, we walked the rest of the way back toward town, keeping our flashlights on their lowest setting, barely speaking. At some point, we both realized something else that didn't sit right. On the way back, we never passed the flashlight, which meant someone, probably the same person, had gone back, picked it up, and switched it off. We made it back to campus, shaken and confused, replaying everything in our heads. Who would be out there, deep in the backwoods, following us in the middle of the night? None of it added up. A few days later, things got even stranger. Word spread around town about a missing person who was last seen heading toward the area near our town. We can't say for sure that it had anything to do with what happened to us, but the timing was hard to ignore. There's no way to know whether they disappeared in town, in the woods, or if it was connected to what we experienced at all. Still, the idea of what we might have stumbled into out there, that's what really messes with me. If we hadn't run, if we'd let that man keep following us, or gone even deeper into the forest, I honestly don't know what we would have found, or whether we would have made it back at all. A few years back, I relocated from the far west coast to a place roughly 1,000 miles inland. The drive cut through the northern stretch of the US, far from the major cross-country highways most people use. These roads were quieter, less traveled, and unless you were headed straight for a major city, you had to weave through a maze of back roads to get anywhere. It was beautiful at first, long stretches of scenery and open land, but after making that trip multiple times, the novelty wore off. This was my final run, with the last of my belongings crammed into the trunk. I'd been driving all day when I reached a small town and decided to pull over for a nap around 6 p.m. I woke up at about 9 and got back on the road. Less than an hour later, my car started to fail. Warning lights lit up across the dashboard, and the steering suddenly felt wrong, loose and unpredictable. Within minutes, it was clear the car wasn't going to make it much farther. I eased off the road and onto the gravel shoulder. It felt almost comical in the worst way, breaking down in the absolute middle of nowhere. Having driven this route before, I knew there weren't any towns for at least an hour in either direction. There was no cell service, nothing around but dense woods, and not a single car in sight. I leaned back in my seat for a moment, trying to process it, then got out to check the car. I didn't know the first thing about vehicles, but I guess I was hoping the problem would be obvious, something simple I could spot. No luck. Whatever had gone wrong, it was serious. And after standing outside for a few minutes, I started noticing just how unsettling the place felt. The road was barely lit by scattered dim streetlights, and the trees stretched endlessly into the darkness. The silence was heavy. I actually remember thinking how much it felt like the opening scene of a horror movie. Still, I knew waiting was my only option. I needed someone to stop, anyone who could either help or give me a ride to the nearest gas station or town. So I stood there, leaning against my car, watching the empty road. After about 15 minutes, I saw headlights in the distance. What surprised me even more than seeing a car was the fact that it actually slowed down and pulled over. The driver stopped right beside me and rolled down his window. He looked to be in his mid-30s, cigarette in his mouth, eyes scanning me for a few seconds before he asked if I was all right. Honestly, I couldn't blame him for being cautious. Picking up a stranger on a deserted road isn't exactly comforting. I explained what had happened with my car. He sat there for a few seconds, clearly weighing it, constantly checking his mirrors while he thought. I don't know how to explain it, but something about him just felt wrong. Maybe it was instinct, maybe paranoia, but every warning bell in my head was screaming at me not to get into that car. Normally, I wouldn't be so cautious when I was stranded in the middle of nowhere, but this time I couldn't ignore the feeling. Finally, he spoke. "Why don't you hop in? I'll take you to the next town. Don't mind helping someone out tonight." I hesitated, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to turn him down without making things awkward. I actually have a friend on the way," I said. "Should be here in a few minutes. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier." He nodded slowly, gave me a tight, unfriendly smirk, then sped off without another word. That reaction alone told me I'd made the right call. Unfortunately, that was the last car I saw for a long time. At least an hour, maybe more. I hadn't realized just how isolated that road was. The fact that it was the middle of the night made it worse. I was half asleep leaning against my car when another set of headlights appeared, this time coming from the direction I was headed. I waved my arms and the car slowed before pulling over beside me. For a moment, my stomach dropped. The car looked familiar. It could have been the same one from earlier, or maybe just another black sedan. In the dark, they all looked alike. But when the window rolled down, I saw it was a woman driving. She looked to be in her late 20s. She immediately asked if I needed help, though something about it felt off. She wore a nervous smile, like she was forcing herself to stop. I told her I just needed a ride, anywhere. A gas station, a town, anything. She nodded, reached over and unlocked the passenger door. I didn't hesitate this time. I got in. The moment the door shut, the atmosphere shifted. It felt wrong in a way that made my skin crawl. She didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead, eyes wide, gripping the wheel. "Thank you for stopping," I said, trying to break the silence. "I honestly don't know what I would have done if you hadn't." She didn't respond. She didn't even glance at me. She never asked what happened to my car, never asked why I was stranded. Something about her behavior was deeply unsettling, but I couldn't put my finger on it, so I leaned back and stayed quiet as we drove in complete silence. After about 20 minutes, I spotted a road sign. Gas station, 2 miles. Relief washed over me. I told her she could drop me off there. She gave a short nod, still not looking at me, her expression completely blank. As we got closer, I couldn't shake the feeling anymore. Finally, I decided to ask her if everything was okay. The woman briefly looked over at me, then snapped her eyes back to the road. That's when I noticed it. She looked terrified, not nervous, not uncomfortable, genuinely scared, and that realization sent a chill straight through me. At the same moment, something shifted in my peripheral vision. I glanced toward it and realized it was coming from the rearview mirror. So I looked back. My stomach dropped. The back seat was almost completely dark, but I could see a shape sitting directly behind me, hunched forward like it had been trying to stay hidden. The second my eyes locked onto it, the figure straightened up. It was him, the same guy who had stopped on the road earlier, the one I'd refused to get into a car with. And his face, he looked absolutely furious. I snapped my attention back to the road and saw the gas station coming up fast. I told the woman to pull in and let me out, now, but she didn't slow down. We were about to pass it. That's when everything clicked. She wasn't in on this. She was trapped too. The man in the back seat was forcing her to pick me up and keep driving, taking us wherever he wanted. I started desperately telling her to turn into the gas station. Before she could respond, the man shouted over me, threatening me to shut up and ordering her to keep driving. We were flying toward the turnoff, still going at least 50, when she suddenly did the last thing I expected. She jerked the wheel hard and slammed on the brakes, swerving into the gas station and stopping just short of the pumps. The moment the car stopped, she threw open the door and ran. I didn't hesitate. I was right behind her. We sprinted into the gas station, and as soon as we were inside, she yelled for the night clerk to call the police. Through the glass, I watched the man climb into the front seat and tear out of the lot, disappearing down the road. In the end, it was exactly what I'd feared. Both of us had been victims of that man, someone who was likely abducting people off the side of the road. I'm incredibly grateful she found the courage to ignore his threats and pull into that gas station. She easily could have kept driving like he ordered. If she had, I don't want to think about where we would have ended up. Thankfully, I don't have to. I work the overnight shift at a small, run-down diner that sits right off the highway. It's nothing fancy at all. The owner's a close friend of mine, and I just needed a job to keep myself afloat for a bit. Honestly, it's way better than a normal diner. This place is never busy, at least not in waves. It's more of a quick stop where truckers or people on long road trips pull off, grab some coffee or a fast meal, and get back on the road. You end up meeting some interesting people that way. Since I work nights, though, it's usually dead quiet. That night was no different. 2 or 3 customers stopped in for coffee, stayed a minute, and left. After that, there was nearly a full hour with absolutely nothing happening. I sat behind the counter by the windows, staring out at the empty highway, lost in my own thoughts. Then, sometime around 1 a.m., a truck rolled into the parking lot. I stepped out from behind the counter and greeted the 2 guys as they came inside. They both looked exhausted, like they'd been driving forever, and ordered exactly what everyone else had that night: 2 plain black coffees to go. After ordering, one of them headed for the restroom, while the other took a seat at the counter as I started making their drinks. A moment later, he spoke up. "Hey, weird question, but you're not here by yourself, are you?" That caught me off guard. I wasn't sure what he meant by it, but he didn't seem threatening, just cautious. So I decided to answer honestly. "Yeah, it's just me tonight," I said. "It's been slow, so I don't really mind." For a second, he looked confused, almost disappointed, like that wasn't the answer he was hoping for. "Well, just be careful," he said. When we pulled in, I saw a guy standing along the side of the building. Looked kind of sketchy. I thought maybe he worked here, that's why I asked. I thanked him for telling me. Right then, the other guy came back from the restroom. I handed them their coffees and they left, pulling back onto the highway. Once they were gone, I walked back to the window and scanned the parking lot from both sides. It was completely empty. I'd been watching outside all night. I would have noticed another car pulling in, and there's only parking out front. If someone else was here, their vehicle would have been sitting right there. Still, the guy hadn't sounded like he was lying. After a minute, my curiosity got the better of me. I stepped outside and checked around the side of the building. Nothing. I walked all the way around the diner, circling it completely. There was no one there. Being outside already felt unsettling enough with the woods completely surrounding the diner, so I didn't push my luck. I went back inside, telling myself the trucker was probably just exhausted and mistook a shadow for something else. He hadn't seemed malicious, and there was no reason to assume he was wrong, but I still stayed alert after that. The diner stayed completely dead. No customers came in, and even the highway traffic had slowed to almost nothing. It was shaping up to be one of those painfully long overnight shifts. I washed some dishes, swept the floor, and eventually stepped away to use the restroom for a minute. I was scrolling on my phone, definitely taking longer than I needed to, when I heard it, the front door opening. I finished up quickly and headed back out, already slipping into my usual cheerful work voice. "Welcome in," I said as I stepped onto the floor, and stopped cold. Every seat was empty. After a second, I slowly walked around the dining area, checking every corner. No one was inside, but I knew what I'd heard. That door has a very specific sound, and I was way too familiar with it to be mistaken. I went over and opened it, peering outside. No cars, no movement, nothing. I tested the door a few times. It wasn't loose, it didn't swing open easily, and there wasn't even any wind. My stomach knotted instantly. I couldn't stop thinking about what the trucker had said, about someone lurking around the building. Maybe there really was someone out there. I forced myself to stop spiraling and decided to keep busy instead. I went back behind the counter and started scrubbing the remaining dishes from earlier shifts, trying to convince myself I was just letting my imagination run wild. Then, over the clatter of plates and running water, I heard something else. Movement. I shut off the sink immediately and set the plate down. The sound came again, closer this time. Before I could even step around the corner to investigate, a man walked out from the back room. He looked to be in his 40s, with a scruffy, grey-tinged beard and messy, medium-length hair. He was wearing a navy blue hoodie that looked worn and unkempt. He smiled calmly and sat down at the counter, while I just stood there frozen, trying to process how he'd gotten back there in the first place. I wanted to ask, but I was honestly afraid of what his answer might be. "I'll have a coffee," he said casually, breaking the silence. I nodded, my hands moving on autopilot as I started the pot. As I turned my back to the counter, I could feel his stare drilling into me the entire time. I was just hoping that if I gave him what he asked for, he'd finish up and leave. I handed him the coffee and he smiled again. "So, it's just you here tonight?" he said. "Must get pretty lonely." He glanced around the empty diner. "Not many people stop by this late, huh?" "Sometimes," I answered carefully, "but it's not too bad." I hated every second of that interaction, but he didn't stop talking. "How late do they keep you working overnight?" he asked. 3, 4 in the morning? I avoided answering directly and told him my schedule changed all the time. I didn't want to give him any details he could use. Eventually he stood up, thanked me, and flashed one more unsettling smile before walking out. I watched him through the window as he headed toward the road. He never got into a car. He just kept walking until he disappeared into the darkness. My heart was pounding. There was something deeply wrong about him, something I couldn't shake. For the next 15 minutes, I didn't take my eyes off the windows. What scared me most was how little I understood about what was happening. Was this the guy the trucker warned me about? If so, that meant he'd been lurking around the building for hours, and that thought made my skin crawl. I didn't want to go back to cleaning or turn my back to the doors at all. I just stood there, watching the empty highway. Then I heard it again. The same sound I'd heard earlier while I was in the restroom. A door opening. But this time I was in the dining area, which meant it wasn't the front door. It was the side access, the one that leads toward the dumpster. I rushed around the counter and looked down the hallway. It was dark, but one of the closet doors was swinging slightly, like someone had just passed through it. That was enough. I ran outside, jumped into my car, and pulled onto the highway while calling the police. When officers arrived, they actually found him still there, hiding inside that closet. It was the same man, but that wasn't the worst part. He had rope on him, and after searching the surrounding area, the police discovered a partially buried stash in the woods behind the diner. Inside was equipment meant for truly awful things. The officers explained that he had likely been watching the diner, then came inside to confirm I was alone. After that, he'd gone back into the woods to retrieve his supplies, planning to come back and grab me, dragging me into the forest where everything was hidden. Thankfully, he's locked up now, and he won't be getting out anytime soon.